So this WiLLcast was with Dan from the Commonwealth Companies. Commonwealth Companies is a really a construction and development operation. You know, we see a lot of here in Fond du Lac. Dan is based out of Madison, and it was really interesting to get to know the development side of their business. You know, as a lighting company, we're pretty far downstream of a lot of the efforts that developers go through to make projects happen. And it was interesting to learn about their specialty and kind of their angle on the market, and you know, also just better understand some of the projects here in Fond du Lac.
Definitely, there are neighbors to that would be the south.
Right
I
down
really
the
had
street.
to, I had to think about which direction that was. They're also on Brook Street. They've been a huge part of the revitalization of Brook Street here in Fond du Lac. Not only are they located in a historic building, I think that's all renovated and retrofitted, but they're also working on another former factory, an old casket factory. They're helping convert that into apartments, which Dan will chat about more in depth.
And one of the interesting things we talked about after the WiLLcast
Right.
was kind of this misconception of low-income housing.
Yes, and actually Dan did state after he thinks it's misnamed.
Yeah, it's a kind of a branding issue.
Right, it's more of affordable housing, which is something I actually had a big misconception about. And we chatted with Dan about this.
After college, right?
Right, when I was still looking to live downtown Milwaukee after I was looking to get out of campus housing at Marquette, a lot of what I qualified for was considered low-income housing. But in fact, it really is, as Dan said, affordable housing that was designed for people just like me, young professionals who had student debt, wasn't making a ton of money with my really great PR degree, trying to live downtown Milwaukee. But there were a lot of apartments that looked really nice, newer apartments in historic buildings that were, they had a rent cap based on your income level. So I think there is this idea that low-income housing has a bad rap. But in fact, it's really helped to bring young families, young professionals, attract talent to different areas as well.
And especially important in cities where the cost of living can be quite a bit higher. And it was just cool to learn about that and kind of their philosophy on how they get these projects and some of the tax credits and things involved. And as I said, as a lighting company, we supply a component, not necessarily for this type of business, but there's always developers involved and general contractors and specialty contractors, and it's cool to learn more about the leading edge of a project and how there are years in the making to make these deals happen. So enjoy this one with Dan from the Commonwealth Companies. You said you guys have an office down in Middleton.
Yeah,
that's
so
where your development team is.
Right. So on the development side, we're a full-service real estate development company. That's the straw that really stirs Commonwealth's drink.
Okay.
The construction team is a related business along with our design group. The development team's focus is primarily like originations of new deals.
Okay.
New projects. So I have a team of 7 developers that are scattered around the country. One of which is with me here in Wisconsin, but we're in 21 to 25 different states chasing opportunities to develop multifamily housing, affordable housing.
So it's development and construction. Are those two things typically separate, or are they oftentimes part of the same operation?
It's very common for
a
development company to have a construction arm. I would say that it's also very common for developers to hire third-party GCs. Vertical integration is something that we lean on when we're meeting with municipalities, for instance, and trying to sell ourselves is that, we're a one-stop shop for the development, for construction, for design, for management purposes, and you're really dealing with Commonwealth through the whole process.
Yeah.
Whereas developers that don't have that luxury, they're bringing in other third-party team members that might not be as, how do I say this, on the same page like our guys are with our development staff. Yeah,
that was a big component of the decision we made when we picked a contractor for our new building across the street. We just got done with that project, and we worked with Keller Builders, and the whole kind of design build process and be able to work with the same team through the whole process was pretty appealing.
Yeah, you guess beautiful building here.
Well, Thank you.
Yeah.
You got a cool project going right down the street.
Yeah, so one of our niches, Louis' niche, has been to develop or save historic buildings.
Yeah.
Obviously, our office building there at 24 Southbrook is an example of that.
For sure.
The old casket factory that's under construction now.
Yep.
That's a project that we've attempted to secure the funding for 3-4 years at
Yep.
this point, multiple times over. Finally got it done, got it closed earlier this summer, and we're able to get it under construction. I think it's going to be fantastic. I was actually in town last week and toured it, and it looks wildly different from the last time I was in there. So they're starting to clean it up and make some headway.
Well, unfortunately, on my way to work, I can't drive by it anymore because they've got it blocked off. But when you first started, it was cool to see the demo process.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing the amount of deterioration that went on with that property in the short period of time from when I first saw it to when we closed, and now obviously they've cleaned it up. But just in a short couple of years, the water that was able to get in, and people with vandalism and everything else, it just deteriorated very quickly.
Is the building mostly steel and brick, or what are the bones of the building?
It's a combination.
It's a combination.
Steel, a lot of wood, a lot of very
yeah.
large wood trusses that are and beams that are being replaced right now. Expensive work to do, but when it's all said and done, those units are going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of natural light, a lot of big windows in that building, so we expect it's going to lease up pretty quick.
Nice.
Be a great change for that part of Brook Street.
Well, we're trying to do our part on this side, and it'd be nice once that building's done on the other side. My wife and I used to live in the Mills Apartments up in Appleton.
Okay.
Basically an old paper mill that
Yep.
turned into apartments, and it reminds me a lot of that building. We had big, huge trusses and wood beams right in the middle of our the unit that we lived in, and there were 400 or 500 units, and every single one was different.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, the historic rehabs are obviously favorites of the development team because it isn't the cookie cutter that some of the new construction tends to be.
Yeah.
And it allows you to do some creative things.
Yeah. So I asked this before, but so development would more or less be sales, marketing, business development. Kind of in construction terms, it's kind of the development umbrella. What's your role within that, and what does kind of that sales and development process look like?
Yeah, so I mean, think of it as originations is really like what my guys pride themselves on. I have a team of 7 of those guys, as I mentioned before. They're scattered around the country. We go out and we try to secure new deals and then secure the funding to get them done.
And who are the folks that you guys are calling on and developing relationships with?
Generally speaking, municipalities,
Gotcha.
nonprofit partners, housing authorities, and the like. Groups that are going to be interested in the product that we bring, or have made mention of the fact that they would like to see affordable housing in their community.
Nice. And what is a typical deal between initial, kind of getting wind of a particular opportunity, and once a contract is signed, is that 1 year? Is it 3 years? What's that timeline?
It can vary. I mean, the affordable space is a little challenging given that the funding sources that we chase after are a little bit different than what you see in the typical market rate apartment development. It's very cyclical in the space we play in. It's very competitive. And so if you miss a deadline, chances are you're pushed for another 12 months. Therefore, it can run from 3 to 5 years from concept to completion.
Yeah.
So
cool. So you're talking about your team. What's each role look like?
Yeah, so my role is Senior Vice President of Development. I've been with Commonwealth for about 4 years now.
Okay.
As I said before, I'm based in our Madison office. Our niche is the development of affordable housing, right? So my role within the team is oversight and leadership of the developers with more of a specific focus on generating new development opportunity. I personally have been in the affordable space for about 20 years now in varying roles dating back as far as UW-Madison as an intern with a competing developer. I've had a number of stops along the way. My experience spans a wide variety of development types, which include new construction, AC rehab, adaptive and historic reuse. Done some permanent supportive housing in my career, and then mixed income development. All told, I would say over the course of the 20 years, I've been involved with about 75 affordable housing projects, maybe exceeding that, and totaling somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 units and maybe $1 billion of
Holy cow.
Total development cost. Commonwealth itself, I mean, founded in 2001 by Louis Lang, who's a local to Fond du Lac.
Sure.
He's done a lot of great things here. They, over the course, we just celebrated 20 years last September that we've been doing this. They merged with Madison-based Mirus Partners back in 2018. And that was really a move to strengthen our capabilities, accelerate our growth. It was also enabled them, the principals of the company, to set the company up for the long-term success beyond the time that they're going to be involved in the day-to-day.
Sure.
I mentioned our vertical integration. Our core focus, again, is really just our tagline is to improve lives and enhance communities by providing high-quality, affordable housing.
So what drew you to the industry? Did you go to UW-Madison?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have like an urban planning background, or what was your initial interest in the space?
So UW, I went to the B school there, the business school.
Oh, nice.
My initial thought was finance.
Yep.
And when I got there, one of the common double majors for folks was finance and real estate and urban land economics.
Okay.
And it was usually a situation where if you were on the 5-year plan, like I was, you picked up the extra credits and just filled out that 5th year.
Yep.
I took the initial real estate course there and was hooked. Didn't at the time really recognize that was the route I was going to end up going. But as I mentioned, I interned with a developer who came in and actually spoke to that class. That had done a couple of developments near the house I was living in on campus, and approached him after the course or after that class in that particular day, and interned with him for a couple of years. When I graduated, moved on, bounced around doing a couple other initial real estate gigs, entry-level gigs, and then found my way back to the affordable space around 2007, 2008.
Did you have a background or an interest in construction as well, or was it more or less on the business and the development side of it?
The latter.
Okay.
Yep.
So what was it like once you finally started to be part of the construction process? And it's interesting how so many of us drive around every day and see all these buildings, and really most people don't really have experience in how things get built. And even we're in the lighting space, so we're typically years downstream of a lot of the efforts that developers and planners, all the hard work they're putting into it, and we're one of the last things to actually go on a job site. And even us being construction adjacent, being involved in the industry, we really had no idea how it worked until we actually went through a construction project on our own. But what was it like going from business, kind of the planning side, to getting into the construction business as well?
Yeah, I mean, the key for me was I've been surrounded by really good people that are very good at what they do, particularly in the construction space at a lot of my stops. Commonwealth is no different in that regard. We've got a great team on the construction side of things that us developers, for the most part, don't have that construction background. So they're very willing to answer questions and jump in when we need their expertise. So over the course of the last 4 years, I've learned a ton. And been able to utilize that with my guys and my team, and ramp up their learning curve as we've gone along.
Yeah, it's got to be a huge help being vertically integrated, where you're always no more than 1 degree removed from somebody that has at least an answer to something.
Yeah, and I think it helps throughout the process. I think for the developers being sort of the front end of the process, even though we follow it through completion. Having access to construction, pre-construction services, and a design team sort of at our beck and call is really paramount to getting things done. I mean, if you don't have that luxury, you're paying a third party to do it. We obviously have overhead related to that, but it's simple to walk down the hall and have that conversation, or run into those guys at the water cooler kind of thing.
So streamlined, relative to having to rely on an outside source. And we, a lot of our sports lighting projects, they can be fairly large, projects, 6-7 figure projects in some cases. They do resemble the construction business. You're putting up 100-foot light towers, and you're working with engineers and specifiers on electrical requirements. And it as we've gone on, we've tried to model the way that an electrical contractor operates. recently we've kind of spun off a project management team. You're having engineers on staff where if our sales team needs something quickly, we can hash out a design very, very quickly. Where a lot of companies will outsource a lot of that. So it's nice once you know these different elements that are required in the process, you can really start to form teams and experts around it. So do you guys have architects and engineers on staff, or what do you outsource? You probably outsource some of that.
Yeah, we hire out the engineering piece of
engineering.
it. So
Okay.
civil and MEPs and structural.
Yep. Yeah, and that's interesting too in working with architects and engineers, and even within kind of that specialty, there's 100 different forms that those agencies take. Some are vertically integrated, where they have architects, planners, engineers. They have team lighting specialists. Others will be engineering only, and they
Sure.
work with companies like yours. So you start to see patterns, but there's still a variety of ways things are done.
One of the challenges recently, honestly, has been on the entitlement side of things through the design process and with the civils and the site plans and working with these municipalities. We've run into long lead times, a lot of lag.
On parts, raw materials, or is it on the design?
On the design
side?
itself, I'll get to the construction piece of it. I mean, that's in and up, its own animal.
We've all experienced that.
Yeah. And that lag time on the design side only exacerbates the longer timelines rather on construction. And so it took us about 18 months to get our head around it, but I think we've now put processes in place to mitigate.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, and then getting parts, raw materials. It's been a lot of fun the last 2 or 3 years, huh?
Yeah, supply chain has been extremely difficult. I'm interested. I'll give you what our latest headache is and get your reaction to it.
Yeah.
But we've got a project in just outside of Fargo, North Dakota, that for all intents and purposes is complete as of today or as of October. But we've been unable to get our hands on the switchgear.
We hear that every day.
To turn the power on.
Yeah.
And so we have a building that's going to sit vacant that is otherwise ready to be leased through one of the harshest winters the country has to offer.
Wow.
That we'll have to heat, provide security for. Is our understanding at the moment is that switchgear is going to show up in like March or April.
Yeah, I've heard switchgear lead times are still a couple years out in some cases, and that's crazy. And it's have you heard about any companies entering the market or new people trying to develop it, or have you guys been able to talk to your customers on approving alternate parts? Or I'm sure that's one thing we've done a lot of. Is I feel like half of our time the last 2 years has been spent on alternates, trying to find components.
Yeah, I mean our PMs and our construction team are constantly looking for alternatives.
Yeah.
Electrical components are one thing, but I mean it goes for it's the case for a lot of materials.
Yeah.
As far as other companies joining that mix, it's honestly predominantly run by two very large suppliers.
Eaton?
Yes, Eaton being
Schneider?
one of them. I'm blanking on the name of our construction guys would rattle it off in a heartbeat, but Eaton is one for sure.
Yep.
And for instance, in this situation in North Dakota, we're trying to find an alternative way to get the meter bank set up so we can turn the power on sooner than March or April of next year.
Yeah, I would think a lot of the stuff that's happened the last couple of years is going to incentivize more alternates, more onshoring, more vertical integration. Even part of the reason we're putting our building in is just to try and control more of our manufacturing process. Certainly outsourcing component manufacturing where it makes sense, but this idea that just everything can be outsourced all the time, it's like I don't know. I think there's going to be a wave headed back the other direction. We're kind of already seeing it, which I think will be good. It'll be good to control more of that here in the States and in the Midwest.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think it's undoubtedly heading in that direction, and hoping that's the case for sure. I mean, we've got project backlog here. Another thing that's been a problem for us recently is subcontractors availability.
Yeah.
And being able to start projects when we want to.
Yep.
We're deferring closing deals to the first part of next year that would otherwise start.
Yeah.
Would have started this fall. And so that's problematic for a variety of reasons for us on the funding side of things. But
that makes sense.
Our timelines related to our funding sources are definite or and in the affordable space in particular.
Got to wait a whole nother budget cycle if the contract doesn't get signed.
Yes,
Yeah.
and there are cliffs related to our financing sources that if you go over, you don't want to understand what those penalties look like.
Well, we oftentimes, we actually do a lot of projects where contractors have to get off the job site and somebody forgot to order materials or something wasn't to spec, and we'll get a call and we'll have to pull a rabbit out of our hat in a few weeks so people can meet some of these deadlines. And again, we're further downstream, but we see that part of it as well. What do you see? One thing we talk a lot about is you just kind of touched on it. Labor shortage. There's for every 5 people getting out of the trades, there's only a couple people getting in.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that? How do you think companies change those trends? I mean, I know you went to business school. In contracting, once you got into your profession, but what have you? What are some of the ideas that you guys are kind of bringing from an outside perspective on how to change those trends?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the magic answer here.
Yeah.
I think our construction guys, honestly, I mean, if they were sitting here, they'd tell you they're scratching their head a little bit in terms of where have these people gone that have left the trades.
Yeah.
And getting them back in, it's going to be sort of the obvious things that you have to do. And the unfortunate reality is you end up paying up for experience that doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
And as a result, you wind up with a product that's less desirable. But the hope is that some of the other macroeconomic factors start to come into play that will push construction pricing down and reduce the amount of demand for these guys, and people start to fall back into the trades. But it's for the foreseeable future, we are definitely concerned about it.
Do you see any automation or anything happening on job sites to kind of offset some of the decline of people getting into the trades?
I mean, you're in some of our projects, or in some of the projects that our competitors are putting out there. You're seeing stuff that's built in the factory and shipped to the site, or panelized construction, that type of thing. Honestly, we're not doing a ton of that because it's relatively new, and the stitching process once it's on site. I mean, when you factor in the logistics of getting it there and then putting it together once it's there, the savings in our experience have not really added up.
Really?
As much as we'd like to pursue that type of thing, it doesn't make a ton of sense in our eyes at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So what else you want to talk about? Any cool projects?
Yeah, you want to you got questions about Brook Street, or you?
Yeah.
I mean,
so you said you were there recently.
Yeah.
So how many developments do you guys have on Brook? You have your headquarters, and then there's the new apartment complex. But
there's the 2 that are further down Brook.
Yes.
And I'm blanking on the names. I mean, Louis done a lot of these deals prior to my involvement at Commonwealth, but a lot of affordable housing right here in Fond du Lac. Brook Street, 62 units, or Brook Street Lofts.
Yeah.
Is the combination of the casket factory and then the old cheese factory, Winnebago. That's right behind it there. There'll be 52 units in Brook Street Lofts, in the casket rather, and then 10 units in the cheese factory when it's all said and done. And then with adequate green space and parking for residents. Advocap is going to have space on site to provide services to residents a few times a week, and then a bunch of amenity space within the casket factory for folks to lean on. Should be a fantastic project when it's done.
Nice. Yeah. Joe Moore was on the podcast, the Fond du Lac city manager, and he was talking about how there's such a housing shortage in Fond du Lac, and how from a development standpoint and from a workforce standpoint, one of the things that could really accelerate things is just more housing for people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been working pretty closely with the city. The city of Fond du Lac's been fantastic, in all honesty. That project is a prime example of that, working with Diane Benson predominantly on the development team at the city on that project, but have been approached about other things that they're taking a look at, and we'll continue to entertain them as long as they make sense, and we can find a way to lease them up.
Cool. What about Madison?
Madison, honestly, to date, Commonwealth we've got a couple of, 3 or 4 acquisition rehabs that the company that we merged with that I mentioned before, Maris Partners, did prior to the merger. And then 2 new construction projects on the east side of Madison. We are about to throw our hat in the ring on an RFP that's going on locally. But other than that, we've not done a lot of development there. And it's not necessarily for any reason, I would say. I mean, it's just we cut our teeth at Commonwealth doing rural 9% deals. And so
what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, 9%, throw that term out there. But, I mean, rural, for your benefit, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, Louis, a lot of success in smaller communities throughout the state in getting the tax credit awards. The tax credits are the primary source of funding that we apply to the state for, or the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, WHEDA. And you utilize those tax credits to basically be the equity downstroke in your project. And it allows you to have a reduced mortgage amount, at which point you're not servicing as much debt. Therefore, you have the ability to charge a lesser rent than you typically would.
So you guys end up owning the properties for the most part?
Yes.
So the tax credits are the down payment, and there's debt financing, and then just the monthly rent payment is the ongoing revenue.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we have an equity investor partner.
Gotcha.
There's a group of investors nationally that have a niche in buying these tax credits. It's typically banks or institutional investors. They come in with the equity component. In a typical market rate deal, equity is going to run somewhere in 25 to 30% of your overall development budget or capital stack. In a LIHTC deal, it kind of gets flipped on the inverse, and that equity is going to be about 70%, 75% at the end of the day. In a 9% deal, now get into the technicalities of that, but in that situation, as I mentioned, your mortgage amount or the debt that you have to carry to fill the capital stack is much
It's pretty
less.
small.
Yes.
Yeah.
Therefore, you can charge a lesser rent,
Yep.
and that's the whole premise of the program.
Okay.
Tax credit program's it's an IRS program. It's been in place since 1986. A very good example of public-private partnership, and it's got bipartisan support, and that's why it's
Doesn't often happen.
No, and it's had its run-ins in the past, but it's managed to survive because it's there's a good lobbying effort there too, obviously, and again, that generally speaking, bipartisan support, housing is an ongoing concern for both sides.
Yep. Well, that's super interesting. It's just again, we're kind of in the construction business, but it's to really drive into a niche, and you guys certainly know. You guys know your niche. You know who you are. It's always cool to see that. It'd be so interesting if we knew the project profiles of all the lighting projects that we work on. We're just a small component, but it's fun to learn that side of it. So, but yeah, anything else you want to go through?
Yeah, tell me a little bit
questions.
about you guys. I mean, I honestly,
nice.
Coming into this, didn't have much of a knowledge. I'm obviously not Fond du Lac based, so I did some homework prior to coming here, but
Sure.
I'd love to know a little bit about great space, like I said.
Yeah, so we Wisconsin Lighting Lab as an entity was founded in 2017. We more or less brought together a couple small businesses that we had. One was NAFCO, which was a aluminum fabrication shop that my dad and grandpa started back in the 70s and the 80s. The second was 1030 Interactive, which was a web development business that my cousin and I started in college. And the third was Light Poles Plus, was an online distribution business, more or less buying light poles from my dad's shop and packaging them with light fixture companies, and we sold them on the internet. So we kind of were running in kind of different directions for a while, and we said, why don't we bring everything together? So then in 2017, we started Wisconsin Lighting Lab. It acquired two of the businesses, and now we're under one roof. We do a lot of sports lighting. We do a lot of parking lots. We're getting into decorative lighting, lighting control systems. We can do color changing LEDs on sports applications. So, it's a lot of custom projects. We're really getting into more on the manufacturing side. Historically have been, some manufacturing, some distribution, but the last really 3 years have accelerated our interest in just continuing to get more and more vertically integrated. But we got a pretty young crew, which you don't always see in manufacturing. As you mentioned on the trade side of things, there's not a lot of people getting into that. Well, it's kind of the same on the manufacturing side. Average age at Wisconsin Lighting Lab is 33 years old.
Wow.
which is pretty young for manufacturing. But we're trying to make manufacturing exciting. Get more people inspired to become part of manufacturing, whether they're on the shop floor or in a marketing position, sales position, and yeah, we have a lot of fun. Got the podcast. We got a little brewery here.
I noticed.
Combination of work really hard, know our markets, and have fun. So,
what geographically, where are you guys?
Very
what's
interesting question. So we only 2% of our business is in Wisconsin. Almost everything is outside of the state. We do some in the Caribbean. We've done stuff in the Middle East. We did Bagram Air Force Base before they shut it down. So all of the 2,000 perimeter lights, we did all those.
Very well lit.
Yeah, well, not anymore because it was a lot of them were taken down. But primarily outside of the state. But yeah, we have two different channels. We have a direct channel. We have an indirect, strategic channel. We work with lighting agencies. But
fantastic.
The few-minute Wisconsin Lighting Lab summary.
Do you get that turn around on you? That question turn around on you often?
No, but it's
not
always
as
nice.
much as I would like it to happen. So
the advertising.
that was great.
We have a lumberjack competition. So if you Commonwealth folks here in Fond du Lac want to take part in a lumberjack competition, we do that every year. Last Saturday of September.
Yep, next year September 30th.
All proceeds, not all money made, goes to support local technology, manufacturing, and trades, education, and causes. We've given away about $45,000 in scholarships over the years.
He means closer to 80,000.
80,000?
Yep.
Okay, $80,000, even better.
Even better.
But yeah, we been doing that for 6 or 7 years. Two of the guys that work at Wisconsin Lighting Lab founded that after they kind of saw a similar event in Colorado.
No, I love it. I have to get a couple of my colleagues up the street. Might be.
I think they would
definitely
they
interested
might
in taking part.
They might already.
I wouldn't be shocked.
It's funny. All of a sudden, you see like conversations like this happen, and then all of a sudden you turn around and 2-3 people go to that event every year. So.
Yeah, and it's been a great. That event's just been great from a networking standpoint.
I bet.
Just getting local people. There's so much interest in doing stuff like that, but until you really get the right core together, it doesn't really, it snowballs in a really positive way once the right people are part of it. So yeah, if you guys have any interest in sponsoring or volunteering or competing,
let us know. We might take you up on some of that for sure.
Ledgegames.com. I'll send you an email.
Okay.
I do have one question for you, though, before we wrap up. You mentioned that you guys like to do a lot of historic renovations and new builds. What's the breakdown on that? Do you tend to chase certain types of jobs more than others, or just varies?
It varies, but state to state, each state gets an allocation of those credits that I mentioned before, and then from the feds, and then they can determine what their housing priorities are. And they basically give the developers a set of guidelines, a scoring criteria to chase, because as I mentioned, it's competitive. And you really sort of become you got to know that QAP, which is the guidelines that I mentioned, that forwards and backwards, and then you're chasing a deal that fits within their priority. Wisconsin happened to be a state that gave a preference for historic deals. Recently, they waffled a little bit on that, but they're back to it. And Louis picked up on that. A lot of what the historic that we've done, if you were to go on our website, you'll pick up on renovations of old schools. For instance, we did one over in Horicon just recently completed. We just did one in Sparta. And we've taken that on the road, too, in other states. But I would say in terms of new construction versus historic or adaptive reuse, it's probably 80-20 or 90-10. I mean, the majority of what we're doing is new construction.
Gotcha. Thank you.
What about sports fields?
To date, we have not.
Well, if you ever come across one.
Dabble, let you know. Yeah, no, we will. Our guys are constantly coming up with creative things, and state to state, as I mentioned, they've got different criteria, so you never know.
Yeah,
where we might find a way to work together.
Well, cool. Well, man, thank you very much for making
thanks for having us.
The trip out, and we'll be in touch. And yeah, thanks for all you do in Fond du Lac.
Yeah, appreciate it.